Lagerald probably as good a perimeter shooter as there is, maybe in the country.
Lagerald Vick, born January 12, 1997. Today's feature is the perfect example of how it takes more than being good at basketball to have success in basketball. It could seem like the two should go hand in hand, but because basketball has evolved into more than playing the sport, other elements come into play that determine just how far you go along the journey to the NBA. You ask any player that didn't make the NBA who played at least somewhere on the pro level, they all feel like in their prime they could have made the league. They also can tell you the exact reason they didn't make it in hindsight, now that the journey has long ended. Lagerald Vick was right on the cusp of following the path all the way through. He was a 5-star prospect ranked as high as top 30 overall and the 8th best shooting guard in the 2015 class. He turned that high school success into committing to one of the more storied college programs in the Kansas Jayhawks, playing at the highest level of amateur basketball at a school that yearly has multiple future NBA draft picks on its roster. Things started off slow as the first 2 seasons he played the backseat to guys like Wayne Selden, Frank Mason, and Devontae Graham, adding top high school prospect Josh Jackson the next year, but as a junior made strides that showed why he was such a coveted recruit for Kansas leaving high school. He shot 37% from 3 as a junior in a breakout year where he was one of KU's top scorers. On a team, 5 of the top 6 eventually made the NBA. 3 of them shot over 40% from 3 as the team made it to the Final Four in 2018. Vick, as Coach Bill Self said after losing in the national semifinal game, playing 32 minutes, going 0 for 2 from 3 with 8 points, was 100% sure, and it was evident he had played his last game as a Jayhawk and was declaring for the NBA draft. Self said himself at the time that, quote, "I believe the time is right for him to move on, not take his talents to the NBA or some other pro league," not encouraging words that mean a lot coming from a coach of his stature, but a clear indication that both sides were ready to part ways. Vick surprised even Coach Self when he announced he would return for his senior season, and in the first game that year he scored 2 points, then exploded for 32, followed by 33, 15, 16, then 27, and 29 2 games later. Vick was the hottest player in the NCAA over its first month, shooting well over 40% from 3, looking like the league's top scorer. Then, over the next 14, had one 20-point game and was either quietly excused or left the team for what they labeled as family matters, never to return, leading to him going undrafted in the 2019 draft. At some point, he looked right on pace for the NBA, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. What happened? Let's talk about it. Salute to MZN_is_ on IG for this request. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Lagerald Vick is a 6'5" shooting guard from Memphis, Tennessee that was a 3-year starter for Douglas High School in Memphis, where he also played football as a quarterback and wide receiver. He was All-District 3 times, All-Metro twice, and an All-State performer both his junior and senior years, not to mention a finalist for Mr. Basketball in Tennessee. He averaged 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists as a senior before committing to Larry Brown and SMU. He decommitted to sign with Kansas after receiving an official offer, beginning his KU career as a reserve the first 2 years. He'd get his chance to be one of the leaders of the team his junior year, a year he was this close to playing his way into leaving school early. Stunt number 1, the mid-level scorer. One thing I've learned over the years from being a player to studying the player journey, specifically when it comes down to wing players whose jobs is to primarily score, is you better be elite at doing so or be valuable in other ways for teams to be willing to choose you over the other options. The last thing you want to be as a score-first player is mid-level at scoring. Lagerald Vick, no question, could score with the best of them when he's on. But that's the thing, he's also off just as much, having one of the more streaky college careers in KU program history. His final 2 seasons, he'd have 3 straight 20-point games, then follow up with 2 points. He could shoot 8 for 8 one game from 3, a school record like he did against Vermont in 2018. Follow that with another 30-point performance, then 5 games later, back-to-back games scoring under 6 points. Consistency was huge, but it wasn't his biggest issue in the scoring department. He was also at a school where there's usually 5 to 7 other players on the roster that will play in the NBA at some point, who all have to get their shots as well, making it difficult for a score-first guy to consistently put up big numbers to justify that being their biggest value. At somewhere like a Tennessee, K-State, SMU, or any school that usually would have 1 star on the team, Vick could have easily averaged over 25 points per game in college. He was that good a shooter, and most importantly, he had that big of confidence and mindset to attempt to score every time he touched the ball. It's the reason my advice to young hoopers has always and will always be to choose the school that can showcase you over anything. Over winning, over location, over history, getting players to the NBA, even over how talented the team can potentially be. Most times, none of that matters to NBA scouts. They want to see a player be the best he can be, display the most confidence, and prove as an individual you are or can soon be a real pro. The NBA does not draft college programs, they draft individual players. Yes, it counts, but you matter more. Vick at Kansas shot tremendously, scored okay, but he never led the team in that department and didn't provide much elsewhere, so easy to overlook. Stunt number 2, not leaving Kansas. Usually you hear me speak on players that may have left too soon, but in my opinion, Lagerald Vick needed to leave Kansas after his junior year. Not necessarily to enter the draft and go to the NBA, as I still think he would have went undrafted that year as well, but he needed to take Bill Self's advice and move on to a different school. One, like mentioned, he could be its sole star player. He already had a name from playing and having some big games for Kansas, so only needed a year somewhere else to show he could go off as a shooting guard like I think he could have. Sort of what his former teammate Quentin Grimes did. Had he stayed at Kansas, he would have fizzled out, but a transfer saved him and now he's in the NBA playing for the Dallas Mavericks and may play his way into a lengthy NBA career. The biggest reason Vick needed a change of scenery though was his relationship with Coach Self. It obviously deteriorated at some point toward the end of his junior year, and Self indicated just as much with some of the comments he made about Vick after they lost in the national semifinal game Vick's junior year. Comments that made it clear Vick may have shown a bit of an attitude towards Self and his staff, thinking he was on his way to the league and Self was just fine with it. Likely ready to move on without his score first and only shooting guard that could create a black hole at times in his offense. When Vick returned, Bill Self's comments once again didn't seem too excited about the prospects of having him back, and not until he went off during the first month of his senior year did Self begin to appreciate what Vick brought to the table. At some point during the season, the relationship seemed to hit a snag once again, leading to Vick's final growth stunt. Stunt number 3, leaving the team early. If you didn't already know, your coach from the previous level can hold all the keys to your transition to your next. Coaches on the level of a Bill Self, which are few, can literally make or break your chances with one bad recommendation to an NBA scout. I'm not saying that happened in this case and not accusing Bill Self of anything. Actually, I applaud how he handled what was an obvious situation ending Vick's time at KU during the season. Self could have badmouthed his former player, but instead allowed him to run with the quote family matters reason for leaving. But based on Self's comments once again, it seemed the relationship was strained between he and Vick, and something tipped it over the edge that he left the team after his February 5th game in 2019 against Kansas State, a game he was benched in the first half and played his least amount of minutes of the season. Self said the team was better in Vick's absence, winning 3 in a row, and then went 9-4 the rest of the way, becoming the first KU team to not win the Big 12 in 15 years. Self in public left the door open for Vick to return to the team, but it never happened. I believe that placed a smudge on Vick's chances not being able to finish his senior year and going out with questions about his relationship with his Hall of Fame coach, leading to him going undrafted. All in all, Lagerald Vick was a solid player who may have been better off at a different school altogether, who ultimately didn't have all the elements in place to make the NBA. Good scorer who couldn't always shine on stacked teams that ended on a less than encouraging note, and it cost him his draft chances. He went overseas and is doing great instead, winning championships and all-star placements on that level, so all wasn't lost. He's 27 years old, a professional, but for these reasons, he didn't make the NBA. Salute, much respect, it's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.